Oh my goodness, happy holidays. We're back with another holiday chat. And Harry, you got the first one of the year this year. How do you feel about that?
I feel great about it. The minute I got your email, I said, let me book this because I know how they get filled up quite quickly.
Yeah. And what do you want to talk about today?
Well, David, we're coming to the close of another year in my self-funded, self-directed search to buy a business. And you know from past experience, I've looked at quite a few. And my most recent find actually came to me as a result of a friend of mine.
Okay.
And he is in the IT world. And one of his clients had mentioned to him that they were looking to, retire and sell their business and move on to better things, which I think didn't include working in the business anymore.
Okay.
And so, I think those referrals sometimes are the best ones when they just come out of nowhere because people know you're looking. And it so turned out that this was the case. The owner was very pleased to get my info, and we had a conversation about a week ago now. And he
Okay.
just described the business to me, and if you like, I can go through that
Yeah. Tell me
description.
about the
And
business.
okay, this particular business has been around since the 80s. So the gentleman that owns the business was in the scientific lab and glass component industry for much of his career, predominantly the import-export side of that business. So he
Okay.
worked with some major players in the industry. And in the early 80s, he decided that due to the changes in the foreign exchange with the US dollar and these other foreign countries he was doing business with was in the favor of the US, so he decided to start importing instead of exporting.
Okay.
And that lasted for quite a few years. And then, of course, the situation changed. And then he found himself doing the opposite. And he eventually kind of went from what he reported to me, 5 million in sales, all the way down to less than a million. So this was over the course of time. So we're
Hmm.
we're we're now approaching probably late 90s, probably early 2000s. Uh,
Okay.
the current state of the business is he operates it himself, no employees, so he's a self-operator. What he does is he has established a relationship with two manufacturers, both in East Asia,
Okay.
and they manufacture these specific laboratory type equipment and all the things that are used in the laboratory, whether at the educational level or end user level. One particular product line is one that was customized for one of his clients. And he got this manufacturer to make this valve, manufacture this valve for this specific use for this client. And that has now been over 10 years he's been doing this and providing this client with this particular valve. Essentially, the business is he operates as really a wholesaler for laboratory and lab testing equipment, and
Okay.
he gets all his supplies from these two manufacturers in East Asia, and then he gets the orders, of course, from his customers. They're not necessarily the end user; they are actually distributors,
Yeah.
and so he gets these orders from them, typically the same product. So he has a very limited catalog of products, which I see as the opportunity to expand. And he himself shared that with me. He's just at a stage right now where going to trade shows and try to develop other product lines is really not in his wheelhouse. He's ready to, he's just doing his thing right now and
So
making.
does he take um delivery of the goods and run a warehouse of some kind and store them and
Yes,
yeah,
he
okay.
he he does. So he has a small warehouse he shared with me. That's where he does all the packing. So these items are pretty small. They're not huge items. Valves, beakers, t small testing equipment. The stuff that you saw in Breaking Bad.
Okay. Okay. And all right. So, um, and as far as the import goes, like, does he have to import like container loads of this stuff? Is it
Pallet,
a
pallet.
capital,
Yeah,
oh, just a pallet? Okay.
right. Yes, and in that order, it contains everything that his customers have submitted to him that they wanted. So he places an order once a month, and there's a
Okay.
long lead time. That's one of the issues with the lead time. And he said it's not an issue, is his customers know that if they need this product, they have to give him enough advance notice to place the order. He does keep some stuff in inventory, those things that turn more frequently. He says, but they're very small. I mean, they're I would call them or classify them as consumables.
Okay. Okay. All right. And so what is the sales level today?
Okay. He sent me his internal statement, and year to date, which is October 31st, the business has generated 444,000 in gross sales, gross revenues
440 for October
through
21st.
October. Yeah, through October 31st of this year. So it's from January 1st to October 31st.
Okay, but it's only October 29th today.
Well, that's what he put on here. I guess when he put it
Oh,
in, it's yeah, yeah,
okay. So
yeah,
$440,000 in revenue. Okay.
yeah.
And then what's his cost of goods sold on that?
It is $110,003.
Dogs. Okay. And then what's he got there for different overhead?
So he had told me, so total expenses, I'm just going to, because he runs this, I think, from his home and then that
Okay.
little small warehouse where he told me he pays $800 a month
Oh,
for
so
the
it's
space.
barely a mini storage kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
pretty small.
barely that,
Yeah.
correct. I guess just enough for him to put the pallet of products in and probably has a table with the packing material and the boxes. He puts it in and then runs out to UPS.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what he does. So through October 29th or wherever he generated this, expenses were 50 grand. So net was 168,000.
Okay, so if I take 440,000 in revenue and subtract 110,000 in COGS, I've got a gross profit of 330. If there's only 50 grand in expenses,
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I was reading the wrong column. Let me start
oh,
over. Yes.
okay.
Year to date, 327,701. That's gross revenue.
327,701. Okay.
Right. And then cost of sales was the 110 and 3.
Okay.
And then the total expenses was the 50,000.
Yeah.
So the number should add up now to 168.
168. So,
Yeah.
okay. And like how many hours a week does he work?
He says he works less than 8, probably 5, 7 hours a week, something like that. Yeah. Most of
Okay.
it is on autopilot. These are long-standing customers. And because I've been in Business Buyer Advantage, I had a list of questions I asked him about, which
Hmm.
of course, as you would guess, what is the extent of the relationship with these manufacturers? It's been long-standing and, he has a relationship. So I asked him, how transferable is that relationship going to be? And of course, most sellers are going to say, it is transferable. I have shared with them. Well, this is him telling me this,
Yeah.
that he plans on exiting the business and that the person that buys it, he wants to make sure there's continuity, and of course the suppliers. And I don't doubt him because they've been doing business, with this person for many years with the same orders. I don't see a reason for them to stop selling their products. So I don't. My main concern would have been with his customers, the people that order from him. I think, and they're here in the U.S. So
Yeah.
that's where I would, I have a little bit of caution around it. Um,
What See, this business just it seems to me like a sales agency or a manufacturer's representative kind of business. It's just along those lines, especially because he's only representing two companies. Um, and you're right, supplier risk is one of the things here. Tell me
Mhm.
about the customers. Like, how many customers are there?
Okay. So he has two big ones. So these are national players, and just because of confidentiality, I'm not going to, I cannot
Sure.
disclose it, but
Yeah.
they have been working with him for quite some time, and I'm going to my notes here to get back on what I was going to do here. Okay. So this is what he told me. He has his nine top uh, products generating 200K a year in sales. So he has like nine products that represents probably a bulk of his sales. Uh, he has 13 distributors, so those are his clients,
Yeah.
generating 80% of sales. And then he has another 30, what he considered mom and pop distributors. These are on the lower end. They order every once in a while that don't really represent a big portion of it. And he says that's about six times a year collectively those distributors would order from him. He claims to have a 65 GPM, gross profit margin, on about the 380 in sales that he does, and his operating expense is about 35%. So I just did the math there, so I figured the remaining is 35%.
Yeah. And so that 35, the
I'm sorry, it
35%.
would be less than 35% because that's 65% gross profit margin. So what his sales are and his cost of goods sold.
Yeah. So he's got a gross profit of 219 on that 327
Right. Yeah.
up until the end of October anyway,
Right.
right? So we're not
Yeah.
again, we're not looking at a full year.
Correct.
So by the time the year is over, he probably expects to have like 200,000 in what we might describe as seller's discretionary earnings.
Yeah, so I used the handy analysis tool and
Yeah.
went through that. I used only the data that I had, which was the year-to-date data, and I added back the items that he told me he pulls out of the business. He operates just like all independent small business owners do, driving maximum value out of the bottom line.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
his automobile, his insurance, him personally. There was some medical expenses. There was also some entertainment and travel, which
Okay.
I completely added back. He doesn't do trade shows. This is travel for him personally. He weaves in some sort of a business trip somehow. I don't know the details of it, but in order to claim it, there has to be some proof of a business related matter.
Okay. So so does he has he given you any expectation of what he's looking for as far as a price?
Yeah, he actually has it listed with a broker, and
Okay.
it's listed at 560. And he shared with me that if he brings the buyer himself, he negotiated a lower commission with the broker. So
Okay.
yeah,
So so what do you think of that? 560.
it's definitely on the high end.
That's
Uh,
that's three times discretionary cash flow.
correct. And I am awaiting his tax returns. So he had his CPA. She should get that to me this week.
So hang on. He's got this listed for sale with a broker, but
Mhm.
there's no package put together with all this stuff already.
I don't think he wanted to give me the broker package because then I guess he's trying to uh, make sure I'm serious first before I guess getting down there. And I told him, let's look at some numbers first before we get, too far down this road. But
Okay.
yeah.
So so I mean this business is really appears to be very, very profitable on a percentage basis because it's so
Hmm.
small
Right.
and one person is doing everything,
Correct.
right? And so, I did a quick search here in one of the databases I have access to, and this is for wholesale trade agents and brokers,
Hmm.
which seems to describe what this guy's doing.
Correct.
And they have just a category here for under a million in net sales, and this is what they say: is they say that these businesses tend to sell for about 48% of sales,
Okay.
so that would put this thing down around 200 grand. Also about 97% of gross profit, which I find interesting because I rarely do I see gross profit
Right.
in this database, rarely do I see gross profit mentioned. But that gross profit looks like it's headed for about 230,
Yeah.
right? And now they say here that on average these smaller businesses sell for a multiple of SDE of 2.39, so about 2.4.
Hmm.
So if our SDE is going to be around 200 grand, that would put the up around, 480 grand, which I think is a lot.
Yeah.
Like for what this is, uh, it's really the relationship. So, I mean, if I were going to be buying this business, I'll tell you what I would do. This guy wants to retire, right?
Correct.
Right. So he needs retirement income. So I would be making an offer that was really heavy on seller financing. And, you know, I might even offer him the 2.39 times SDE, but I would make him hold paper on three-quarters of it over an extended period of time at a very low interest rate. And I wouldn't personally guarantee the note. I would make it an obligation of the business.
Right.
So if the business he built carries on over the next few years and you're able to make money from it, then he gets paid.
Mhm.
Like
And
there's
he
just so
disclosed that. He
there's so
did.
few
He's
relationships.
willing to do that. He
He
disclosed
is.
he's willing to. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
But because he probably understands that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to find someone willing to pay money for what he has, because what he has is very, very fragile.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I did like about it is the opportunities are in, first of all, his website. You could tell it's old. There's no search engine optimization. There's no interactive catalog. It's just still pictures. Product lines have been stagnant. He's been selling the same thing, and I get it. He's just at that stage in the life cycle of the business where there's no need to expand it any further. He's made a living off of this business for quite some time. It meets his standard
If
of living, so to speak.
if you bought this, I mean, let's just assume that we're talking about a deal where you're going to pay him over many years, like let's say 8 to 10 years.
Hmm.
So conceivably, you're going to have 50 grand a year going out to him or something like that, right?
Hmm.
From a cash flow of about 200 grand, you can afford to pay that to him, right? And cover your bills and take home a salary and all that kind of stuff. So, what would you do to make this business better? You mentioned the website and stuff, but what would be your 100-day action plan once you took over?
Okay. One, of course, is meeting with customers, getting a sense of any other products that they would like us to supply them with, but was never introduced to. So expanding the product catalog,
Hmm.
uh, finding other suppliers, manufacturers of the product. So hedging my risk against just having two. Right now, there's just two.
Yeah.
Then the other part, the component would be attending the trade shows, the industry trade shows for this industry. There are quite a few. I did some research. They're typically in Chicago, actually, and Vegas. Of course, most conventions are there, and they're held 2 to 3 times a year. And going around, this is what he has done in the past. And then he would go around with his catalog and go into the different vendors out there trying to, you know, determine who's looking for what. His competitive niche or his advantage is small quantities. So
Is it
apparently,
fair? Do you think it would be fairly easy to identify companies that might be potential customers? Like, do the customers all fall into a certain category? Would you be able to generate a list quite easily somehow?
Uh, I would suspect so. The way he was describing his clients, they're really distributors that are selling to the end users who are typically institutional or like a
Okay.
small laboratory, uh, uh, a school that has a chemistry lab,
Yeah. Yeah.
those types of things. Or
Okay. All right.
small practices that are doing lab work in-house, but they're using some other rep to do that. He doesn't go direct. He said that there's no need to do that. So,
Okay. So these small distributors, you would be able to find them quite easily. Would you be able to just start doing like a telephone campaign, just start calling these people up and
yeah, I think
talking to
that
them?
that would be easy enough to do. And once I curate a list of distributors in this industry, that's exactly what we'll do, and put a marketing campaign together, all with you know, the purpose of establishing relationships and finding out what other product lines we can curate for them.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. So what kind of offer do you think you're going to make him? Because I'll tell you and I mean we just looked up a reference here on a website that has some broad rules of thumb about different industries.
Right.
The reason why the SDE multiple methodology is giving us such a vastly different number than the other two that I read off, the revenue one and the gross profit one, is because the business is so small
Hmm.
and there's no staff. Like the
Right.
overhead is so thin. Like if you bought this and then you started to execute the plan you're talking about, I can't help but think that your profit and loss statement would start to look very different. Like if you hired a telephone person to work the phones and make phone calls, maybe arrange and like an appointment setter who does outreach and makes phone call sets appointments for you to join people on the phone or on Zoom, or calls people in advance of a conference, trying to make meetings between you and those distributors while you're at the conference. Like so, you could probably very easily add another person to this, and then all the travel costs. Like to me, the reality is that the profitability, the SDE, is probably not really naturally what he's got out of it. Because if the business was going to be run sort of in a quote unquote normal fashion, like he's running it by the like down to the bone for the maximum possible take he can get. He's really milking this thing.
Correct.
Like I don't necessarily think it's quite fair to credit him with the level of cash flow that he's showing because I don't like he's just coasting
Hmm.
and it's not a normal business condition. Like like if he had another $50,000 a year of payroll and travel expenses and his SDE was only, you know, I don't know, well, 50,000 of payroll plus some travel expenses, his SDE would only be down around 120. It would, be pretty much a job. In that respect, the multiple of SDE would give us approximately the same sort of value that those other two methods give us,
Hmm. And
right?
that's absolutely correct. And I've had those same exact thoughts about the business. And to answer your question, there's two components here. One, I have the benefit of free labor, aka my
You
wife.
do?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, she may help you out, but I don't think it's fair
Uh,
to you know,
oh no, she's going to be involved. So she liked the idea of the business being there's no brick and mortar. She could run it from home. We'll get just a small warehouse, and so she likes that idea. And she has experience in managing resources, both human and otherwise. She was in the
mhm.
property management world before, and I don't anticipate her, having issues picking up the phone and calling. So.
Okay. What about the operating capital component? What are the receivables like here and the investment? Yeah, you told me the inventory, I think, did you?
Yes,
Or did you?
no, I didn't. In fact, I did get one of his he doesn't have an aging report like I he has an aging receivables but not payables. So I didn't understand that. But and again, this
Well,
report,
hang on. The reason why he doesn't have an aging payables report is because he may be sending deposits when he makes orders, or like he may not have much of an accounts payable. We don't know unless you've discussed with him what his terms are because he's only got two
oh,
suppliers, right?
right, he only has two suppliers. That is right. So he shared an invoice and about what he just did to his suppliers. So it's kind of a net 30 kind of thing with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
For net
Now,
30 from when he orders or from when he receives?
so he pays 30% up front and the remainder when it ships. So
Okay,
30% when he
so
makes an order to the manufacturer.
so he pays for everything before it leaves
Correct. Yeah,
the point of origin.
correct.
And then how long does it take to get here?
Let's see. He said in his last email to me. So this particular one, he placed the order on July 25th. Uh, 30% payment. The balance was due on 7/31. I'm sorry, the balance. I'm sorry, 30% payment on 7/31, and the balance is due on 9/25. And it parts from his manufacturer in East Asia on 10/17. So he's not going to get that until December 5th.
Okay. So he's prepaying.
Correct.
He's paying the whole thing before it ships. So when on did he show you a balance sheet?
Yes, he did. And
Okay.
I'm pulling that
So
up
at what
now.
point does he put the inventory on his balance sheet?
So the latest balance sheet that I have, of course, dated October 31st. I guess this was within the system. He has inventory of 293,788
300 grand of
currently.
inventory.
Yeah,
So do you know that like there's two kinds of inventory for this guy? There's inventory in his warehouse and inventory on the water. So is
correct.
there any way of knowing that? He probably doesn't delineate.
No, but I'm going to just presume it's combined.
Yeah. What did he say about his inventory? Is his expectation that you're going to pay him at
Yes,
business
he
asking
was.
price plus inventory, or does it include the inventory?
Okay, that I did not finalize. He just mentioned in some kind of like a mini memo that he had at the time of our communication 200K in inventory.
Mm.
I didn't inquire if it's comes with the price or not, but that's a good question. That's a good takeaway. Okay.
Because this is a very big question,
Yeah.
right? Um, what about receivables? He sells to distributors. What kind of terms do they expect from him?
So per this agent report, so right now on the balance sheet, he has 75,000 in receivables.
Mm. And but you don't know how they break down as far as 30, 60, 90 day.
Yeah, yes, I do. So on the receivables, 0 to 30, he has 42, 31 to 60, 21, and a bulk of it is 61 to 90, $11,407.
Okay, so 11,000 is in 60 to 90, but more than half of it is within 30.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So it looks like on average we're probably around the 40-day receivable mark. Like
That
if
is
it were
correct.
averaged out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So
41. Yeah, 42.
so
And
in
yeah,
addition to money for inventory, this you also need money for receivables. And you actually need money for payables because you pay in advance.
correct.
So you tie up money. So that's why the inventory number is so high. So at this current moment, he's got 350,000 in inventory, and then you said the 200 was what on the balance sheet, but he told you he currently had
No,
350.
he told me he had 200, but the balance sheet is showing almost 290. I'll tell you what it says. The balance sheet is showing 293, 788 in inventory.
Okay, and let's for a small business with one guy, it's also totally possible the balance sheet is not correct.
Correct.
right? Like, I mean, he could just be making purchases and making sales, and at the end of the year, his accountant asks him to count his inventory, and it just gets reconciled at that time.
Correct.
But you're pretty
Which,
confident in the cost of goods sold. That makes sense based on the margin he told you.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
because if the inventory is wrong, it can affect the cost of goods. So here's you know here's what I'm thinking. Um, this business could be worth anywhere between 200 and 480, but it's got to come with probably about 300 or 350,000 of operating capital if you include the inventory and the accounts receivable. So it's very unlikely that this business, really has any degree of sort of goodwill. Like, um, because if you paid him $1, but then he wanted you to buy the inventory and take over the receivables, then you'd be shelling out between 270 and 350,
Correct.
right? So for
That is, and you explained it correctly. That's exactly what this business is comprised of.
yeah,
Inventory and receivables. That's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the challenge here, like, did you talk at all about whether he wants to do an asset or a stock sale? Is that kind of something you guys chatted about at all?
No, I actually shied away from any discussion about that until I got more numbers.
Right.
So once I get obtained the 3 years of tax returns from him, I'm sorry, from his CPA, and I put it on the analysis module. I've already done some adjustments like the travel and the medical expenses and stuff like that. I already did that.
Yeah.
But my gut after I saw this internally prepared statement, I assess, and if I was to offer it just based on this, it was really going to be like 270. That's because I could probably do that, and then he can walk away, except for giving me some time to help me learn the business. But that would have been inclusive of inventory, which I think was kind of on the low end. But I wanted to start there because I wasn't sure. Since I'm not in this warehouse, I can't see it. I mean, I really don't know what's in there. You
Yeah.
know, he could
So,
have sold everything and shipped it out.
well, but okay, so here's the other problem with this kind of inventory is you're talking about what sounds like a room full of tiny little doodads that you aren't going to know what they are. So there could be inventory in there that's stale and not saleable.
Could be, right.
You're not an expert on that yet.
Yeah.
Um, the other problem though is that if it is a low point in the inventory today, and potentially next month there could be orders that come in for a lot more stuff, maybe the inventory and receivables spike at 500,000 at some points of the year. We don't know.
Right. Which
But
is all
you're
good questions to inquire on the
yeah,
follow-up call.
right, because you're going to have to know because you're going to have a plan
Correct.
if that happens, right? And so I'm just thinking about this stuff, about whether or not there'd be any appetite for someone to finance it, like a bank. Like, I mean, a normal inventory line. It's such a small amount. It's a small company. It's really specialized stuff. Like, I don't think you'd be, I mean, you personally might qualify for a line of credit based on your
Hmm.
own personal credit position or something like that that you could use to finance this inventory. But having access to capital, like, I'm just imagining, let's say you had an opportunity to sell an extra $100,000 worth of stuff. That $100,000 worth of stuff is going to cost you about $35,000 in costs. You would have to put out the $35,000, and if you borrowed the 35,000, you'd be paying interest on it for probably 3 or 4 months, right? So at 10% interest, that would be $3,500 a year in interest. Divide that by three, assuming that you're carrying this for
Hmm.
4 months, be $1,000 of cost. So I mean, you've certainly got the margins to afford to borrow money if you need
Hmm.
to float additional inventory and stuff like that. Um, My worry is that his expectations are totally out of whack. Like, I wonder if he expects he's going to get this 500 and some thousand, and then he gets to keep all of his operating capital, and maybe like we don't know what his idea is about the inventory being included or not.
Hmm.
Um,
And I
or
suspect you're
offer,
right. Yeah, about his expectations. Like you pointed out earlier in the conversation, this is his retirement. So he's looking to cash out as high as he can without fully understanding that he doesn't really have a business, so to speak, in the
yeah.
terminology that we've used in the Business Buyer Advantage program.
Do,
It's just
do
him.
you think he's got money set aside? Like, do you think he was,
Oh, he
you
did
know,
say that. Yeah, he says he's done well for this business. He's uh, how should I put it? Accumulated his earnings throughout the years from this business. So my sense is he's pulled out, dividends in the form of dividends in some form or fashion. So, which the tax return on the tax returns, I'll see that.
what now? What's your position? Like, are you in a pretty good spot with respect to money that you can invest or access to credit or like a HELOC on your house or
Oh,
something like that?
yeah, yeah. Which is what's a little, which is what is attractive about this business because it's at a capital level that I can handle. I've got the resources I can leverage. I could probably get, let's say we settled on 350. Let's just say it's 350. I'm definitely going to ask him to take back some of that. I was hoping he'll take back at least, 40% of that. And which, and tell me if this makes sense or not. I'd like him to take back whatever the value of the inventory is at the time as a seller
For
note.
him to finance the inventory,
Correct.
but on an amortizing loan or just like
Yeah,
interest?
yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
would be. I'd like him to be on standby. I would be proposing like 6 months on full standby, which should give us enough time to learn the business and get acclimated to the process, which he has offered to stay on and do. And then the other funds would come from equity, my own personal resources, and then I would get 100K line, like you described, for working capital.
Okay. So you're off, you would offer to buy his inventory basically, or you said 270. So is that
Oh
including
no,
inventory?
350. Yeah, so I was
Three.
saying yeah, if I can put together 270 and just offer that, and he'll be on his way. But that is highly unlikely considering where his expectation level is right now at 560. He may
Yeah.
not go for that.
So this is what I was thinking. I was thinking that you could offer him something like this. You could say, look, I would do a deal to buy your inventory and receivables.
Okay.
So you're going to basically take over his operating capital position, and maybe that deal isn't cash. Maybe it's like half down, half, over 5 years on a note. But
Okay.
then I would also say I'll give you a percentage of my profits after I take $80,000 salary every year,
Okay.
like 10% of any profit above me taking 80 grand, and and do that for like 10 years. Just sort of make him an almost an equity partner in this business with you. So
Okay.
he gets to cash out his working capital position, but he has an interest in the business. And the reason why I think this is so key is because the business is simply just relationships
Correct.
with a small handful of people, like a very small handful of people. And if something crazy happens and nobody wants to do business with you 3 years from now, at least you could probably liquidate, some value out of the stock, right? Like
Yeah.
the operating capital part that you're talking about paying him, um, you're getting some value for that. You're getting inventory and receivables. Um, I think you would, like, if he agrees to any deal with you, the very first thing you have to do is you've got to find yourself some kind of chemistry student that you can hire to help you inspect the inventory, someone who can tell you what the things are and not just necessarily what he says they are.
Well, David, I've got something even better than that. My
What?
good friend is a chemistry professor at the
There you go.
university.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So because you're going to have to have some way of verifying what he tells you about some of these little, I can just imagine the little doodads, right?
Yeah,
Little
correct.
plastic and metal and glass things that I'm sure all have names that you'll have to learn. But I would find it bewildering.
Yeah, that was actually something I was a little concerned about when I started exploring the business. I went to his website, I was looking at it, and you're right, there are a lot of doodads. But after talking to him and him explaining what they are, and he wasn't like technical about it. He says, typically these things are used in X, Y, Z. Like for example, beakers.
Hmm.
Most high schools have them, in their chemistry lab. Those types of things, or hospitals with cell counters, those types of things. So, which a cell counter is actually just a little small rectangular looking contraption with, and you've seen images of them to take this long needle and, put it in the thing.
Yeah, when they're gonna like genetically engineer the
Yeah,
monster or the
there you
clone
go.
in
You
in the
got it.
movie. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
And then all the other stuff that goes in Breaking Bad.
Uh, so yeah, so who would be his competitors? Like, have you gone and looked for who they might be? Like,
Well, interestingly enough, some of them are his very own clients, that buys this stuff. Um, like they're just one big one I told you about with, I'm not going to mention the name. There's uh, I did Google search, on lab equipment suppliers, and there are a lot out there, big names, multi-million dollar, billion-dollar companies. My sense, what I've gathered so far from the conversation with Seller and what I've seen is his moat is small quantities that are only needed like almost like on demand kind of thing. So the bigger suppliers, packaging, two or three cell counters is, with an
yeah,
Amazon-like facility is not going to make him any money. So I think that's
right.
where he and then his pricing arrangement with those two manufacturers in East Asia. Those are his two competitive advantages.
Because they give him better pricing, or because they're
Correct.
willing to
Yeah. To give him
or because
right.
they're also willing to sell him smaller quantities, like a pallet
Correct.
load.
Yep.
Okay. Um,
Which is a concern because I want to make sure that that relationship is going to extend to me. No, I'm not going to travel all the way to the East Asia to meet these guys, but you
oh
know,
yeah, you will. Yeah. I mean, you're not gonna do a deal like this without knowing that you've got the same kinds of arrangement with them. Like, and I'm not exactly sure which country they're in, but I would expect that um, you know, for them culturally, it's probably very important to meet you face to face. Um, like there's a huge supplier concentration issue here.
yeah.
Like assessing those relationships before the deal is done is, I think, is critical.
Wow. I did not
Yeah.
plan to make that trip. They're in two separate continents, actually. Uh,
Well,
I
you're
never
at
thought of it
least
that
gonna,
way, but
yeah,
go ahead.
you're at least gonna have to talk with them face to face. But I
Oh,
think
yes.
I,
Yeah,
I,
like a Zoom.
but I think it's going to be important that there's a commitment or a plan to see them. Now maybe they come to North America for some event or something. I don't know,
Could
but
be. Yeah.
but these are relationships that you need to deposit goodwill into. Like, especially if there are few other choices of people who will do what these people will do.
Okay.
So the his customers, you said most of them are other distributors, not end users. Um, what are their prospects like? Like, I would want to look at the industry. Are there a lot of these small distributors? Are there, are these there consolidation happening in the industry? Like, I would want to know what the long-term industry trends are for the people he's selling to. Um, because if you think that he's got customers who are themselves distributors and he's sending them like two cell counters, I don't know if that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Like to me, an individual end user lab might want to order two small things, but for a distributor to order a really small order, does that make sense? I guess it depends on what exactly their business is. Like if it's more of a school supply distributor and they just happen to carry some lab stuff, maybe that makes sense. But
Mhm.
if they themselves are suppliers for laboratory goods, then you would think that they would have more volume.
Mhm. And better pricing.
Well, I don't know. What you're talking about here is you're talking about getting into something very new for you, right?
Correct.
Like it's a
Yeah.
whole different business. But I think that if you approach it in your next conversations with him with this kind of thinking, like just try to look at it from the point of view of the different actors. So what's in it for the manufacturers in Asia, right? Why do they want to sell to this guy, right? It's just an exercise in empathy and trying to appreciate their position.
Correct.
And then you look at the other people in the on the playing field, you know, um, why um, are some of these customers buying from him? You already talked about the small order size. Um, I would want to know about pricing. Like, are the bigger companies offering the same goods at lower prices, but they just won't break up, case lots or something like that? Like I would want to know in detail what the reason is for some of these people to buy from him, just to measure out and see if it is just relationship or if it is something else. Um, I'm sorry, you may have told me in the beginning though, but what percentage of his sales would his top five clients represent? Do you know that?
Let's see. He mentioned 13 distributors generate 80% of his sales.
13. Okay, but do you know what the top five are?
Yes, one is an international company. I'm looking at his aging report,
Hmm.
and I this was going to be the other part of my due diligence investigation was to Google some of these names on here. There's one, two, three, four. I'm just based on this aging report that I see the
Mhm.
largest amount of invoices for.
So there's four that are really big. Can you kind of guesstimate how much of his sales might go to those four?
Let's see. One of them has only 830. I think the largest one is even split 6 grand. And this is within the 0 to 30 days.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I know we're just probably
Yeah.
looking at 1 month of
Yeah.
revenue, but
Correct. Yeah. So that's $42,000. And I would say about 60% is on these four. Just looking at the outstanding invoices in the 0 to 30.
so 60% of sales could be to four customers.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a high risk relationship business. I think
correct.
that
Yep.
buying his stuff and then giving him a cut of performance is probably the only way this makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. That's exactly why I signed up for the holiday chat to get those insights.
Well, it's these are the tough ones, right? Because
Yeah.
most people would say, well, it's not really a business. He's just like this guy, like a sales rep guy. And I think that's true, but there's definitely some money to be made here. And, is there an opportunity to grow this thing? Like there are probably people out there who have heard of him, maybe past customers who knows? Like you could call people that haven't bought from him in 10 years and there could be a new person there that doesn't even know who he is, right?
Correct.
Like there could be all kinds of different ways where you could, shake some trees and get some other volume revenue through there.
Correct.
Um, yeah, you like sales?
Yeah, I'm in sales right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is I'm no stranger to picking up the phone or
Yeah.
meeting
I mean,
people.
this is what this is. I would
Yeah,
call it a sales agency
yeah,
more than a distributor, right?
yeah.
It's he's kind of representing these two brands to these companies. Um, yeah. Anything else you want to cover here before we wrap up?
Uh, Earlier, well, just two things. One, the industry trend suggestion you had, I actually reached out to a the SBDC to request um, industry data
Hmm.
on the laboratory wholesale distributor industry. So once I get that, I'll be reviewing that. It usually comes with who the big players are, kind of like a macro overview. It might have a report, and if there's consolidation or it's still fragmented, I want to say most of these things are done overseas. That's what I've gathered so far. A lot of this stuff is manufactured overseas,
Hmm.
and except for the highly critical, highly complex pieces, that's probably still done here in Canada. Uh,
Yeah,
and
and
then,
I think some of that stuff might be on its way back, with the this recent trend towards deglobalization. Like if you think about the microchip stuff going on, where there's all
that's
these
true.
chip
Yeah,
chip foundries being established in North America, um, it it could spread to other industries. I don't know, but like I would want to know about you know the prospects of your customers, right? So if a lot of this stuff is going to schools and hospitals, for example, that I mean that's pretty solid stuff.
right.
Like schools and hospitals are always going to have budget for this stuff. They're always going to be buying. Um, but if it's if there's a certain particular industries, like I don't know if a lot of this stuff maybe is going into food testing labs or something like that. I mean, there could be some exposure to on the upside or downside to some of the downstream industries that this company is selling to. I'd be curious about that. Um, just as a line of thought, just to see where it leads you, and he himself may be able to give you some insights into that. But once you start learning the language, you're going to be able to start Googling and finding your own news and industry articles and websites and
Yeah,
interviews and stuff, all the media stuff that is particular to that industry.
yeah. And one thing, and tell me how you would phrase this. He doesn't go direct to the end user, but I suspect there is a market for that, especially the smaller labs or the smaller facilities that, don't need the stuff as frequently, or they need something that the big guys don't carry because there's not enough margin. So that was one source of sales, additional revenue, I was thinking, going direct to the end users.
Yeah, and so here's the risk in that. The risk in that is that if you've got good relationships with your customers who are distributors and they find out you're trying to compete with them, they might not like that.
Right.
Um,
But maybe I can find out who they're really selling to. I presume this seller will know that. He'll probably have an idea who they're selling to. And I want to believe they're selling to much larger institutions, not the independent end
well, I mean,
user.
the idea you have isn't necessarily a bad idea. I just think that what might make sense is for you to spend like a year in this industry learning more about it. Maybe look for other customers that are just like the ones you're already selling to, like those small distributors, and really suss out what is happening, what the field looks like, who's buying from who. It could make sense for you to get into direct sales, but for example, you might want to do it through under a different name or
Okay.
something like that. Like you may want to be selling to end users under a different name at different price points, certainly with different terms, right? If somebody wants to order up two little plastic doodads, you're probably just going to take a credit card payment,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's you know and then you got to watch out for those Breaking Bad guys
Yeah.
because you don't want the police.
Yeah.
You don't want the police to raid some RV somewhere and find invoices from your company and come asking questions.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And I guess that's exactly why he probably doesn't sell to the independent end user.
That that would be a whole bunch of heartache.
Wow. Well, this David, you shared again some very valuable insights into what I should be focused on, kind of the bigger picture and the framework from which to approach this business acquisition. And I will keep you abreast of my findings at another call.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I think it's a great find. I think it's interesting,
Yeah,
and I hope as you uncover, peel back the layers of the onion, that it continues to look like a good thing because his expectations, I think, are almost certainly out of whack.
correct.
But you may need to let him know you like it, but it doesn't make sense at his price, and that you want to talk if he changes his mind or whatever. But yeah, I think
Okay.
it's interesting what you can find through networking.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And FYI, I was in your neck of the woods about a month ago. Had a wonderful time in Toronto.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Toronto sometimes gets a bad rap from the rest of Canadians, but that's just because we're jealous of that big tower.
Oh, it's a beautiful town. The weather was perfect. A lot of stuff was closed. Well, not closed, but not fully functional because it's October. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's summer is
Tourist
over.
season is definitely winding down. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But we still had a good time.
All right, man. Well, Merry Christmas
Merry
and
Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Likewise. Bye bye.